Hello everybody and welcome to Sim.bc where it is 1939, not the year but the time. In the that was probably the worst joke I've ever even tried to do. In the evening, yes, it is quite of a late one today because today I had a presentation in school, so spent a couple of minutes this morning training for that, rehearsing for that. Did I really? No, I didn't. I was going to, but I woke up at 11 and this was at 2:30, and I just spent my entire day going there because the trams was having a bit of a problem and yeah, so on and so forth. But my intention at least was to go there, be there on time, be there way before it began and practice some of my parts, finalizing in other projects, the enterprise and leadership hand in that course and do stuff like that. But it didn't happen because the tram was late. But that's yet again why you go earlier on days that is important like this one. Because you want to be there on time. Because otherwise, who knows, I wouldn't have been. Anyway, but that's not why you're here today. No, you're here today because we're going to review or finalizing this entire thing that we've been doing now for a couple of days. Negotiations and culture intertwined. Yeah, I know. It's going to be all crazy, going to be all good. And then tomorrow, I'm thinking, right now, yeah? I'm thinking that I should probably try and do something with the sustainability report that we reviewed from Ben & Jerry's, because there are some very interesting points there. Maybe not Ben & Jerry's specifically, but overall the things that we discussed and that we took up, greenwashing, so on and so forth. But we will see if that is what we're going to do tomorrow or if there is something else that we're going to do. Anyway, let's get started. Let's get into it. So, we've discussed influence of culture in international negotiation, the questioning process in negotiations. What is culture? We went through three different definitions, the definitions in particular being culture is the collective programming of the mind. That's a great Hofstede for you, or Garrett Hofstede, sorry, but that's Hofstede for you. Culture is the way a group of people solve problems. That's Trump and ours. And then S. Robbins coming in slightly with a third one with culture is like water to a fish. It's there all the time, but the fish is oblivious to it. And yes, now I have actually learned to say oblivious. We all make progress, it's just in different ways. And then we have conceptualizing culture and negotiation. Culture is a group level phenomenon as presented by the definitions. Thus, a defined group of people share beliefs, values, and behavioral expectations. Cultural beliefs, values, and behavioral expectations are learned and passed on to the new members of the group. We went through three layers of culture, which is the artifacts and symbols, the norms and values, and then the basic assumptions and behavioral implications. With other words, things that you could see, the top of the iceberg, and then it was the first level and then the second level, or second or third, however you want to view it. That is like the hidden iceberg, the things that you don't see but is there and makes up a big part of the culture, how people identify with the culture and so on and so forth. The three layers of culture is the outer, what we can see, the tangible, the middle, how we interact with others' norms and values, and then the inner, the core assumptions / beliefs. How do these layers relate to negotiation? Well, we went that through as well. Culture as learned behavior. Understanding the effect of culture documents the systematic negotiation behavior of people in different cultures. We do not focus on why members of a given culture behave in a certain way. However, there is also the pragmatic view, which is approach concentrates on creating a catalog of behaviors that foreign negotiators should expect when entering a host culture. Yet again, this is the spawning of stereotypes, which we discussed in that video as well. Moving on then to culture as shared values, concentrates on understanding central values and norms, and then builds a model for how these norms and values influence negotiations within that culture. We also have the cross-cultural comparisons are made by finding the important norms and values that distinguish one culture from another, and then understanding how these differences will influence international negotiation. Moving on, yet again, we have the four Hofstede dimensions, which is individual, collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, and career success / quality of life, which also is masculinity and femininity, or goal orientated or process orientated. And these are how you interact with different negotiation styles based on what you and the other party is having of these levels. Then we also have Hound's model of cultural value, the cultural can use low or high context communication. Low context cultures tend to communicate directly, whilst in high context you think a lot more about the context. You know, as I said, high context awareness, I would almost say that it is. And then you also have the monochronic and polychronic structures of how you categorize stuff and how you go through things. Is it through a sequential manner or not? Then we also have what we should consider in a cross-cultural negotiation by Fisher: the players in the situation, the styles of decision-making, national character, cross-cultural noise, and interpreters and translators. And there are some of the slides that are covering that. Assumptions and negotiations is probably also that. Now, then we go into what I think we discussed the last or second to last day, which is problem during international business negotiations. Gram. Language. Don't underestimate its importance. Nonverbal behavior can be a critical message during negotiations or a way of making the other person uncomfortable, or for instance, avoiding eye contact. This is yet again nonverbal communication, dependent on who you're talking to, could stand for, I would say, up to 60 to 95% of all communication. Yet again, looking into the lamp instead of the camera. My eyes. Yet again, cannot recommend that. Then we also have values are difficult and hard to understand. For example, what value is placed on punctuality? Should I come in time? Should I come a bit late? Why should I? Why should I not? And how does this all play out? Thinking and decision making. The Western approach tends to view negotiation as a sequential process, whereas the Eastern approach is holistic. So how do we measure progress in the negotiation? Yet again, this going through everything in a sequential manner or a holistic manner of going through it in that, like, oh, we're taking A, then D's and C's and G's and F's and Z, whilst in the Western it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on and so forth. So how do we measure progress? Oh my world, how do we measure progress when we are so completely different in our ways of going about different things? Framework for international negotiation, the WIS strip. This is the basic concept of negotiation process: strategic versus synergistic, or position versus interest, negotiators, selection criteria, experience, seniority, gender, ethnicity, tech knowledge, significant type of issue, substantive issue focused on control or relation based, concern with protocol, formal or informal protocol. Yet again, I say keep it informal as long as you can until the very end, before you sign everything, because otherwise people will say, well, you made a concession right here and we've already signed upon that, so now you're kind of forced to make a concession for me. Something like that. And then we also have complexity of language, high context versus the low context cultures. And then we have cross-cultural negotiations, a few final things to consider, which we went through yesterday, and these are: the negotiating is a social process that is embedded in a much larger context of culture. The context increases in complexity when more than one culture or a country is present. Yet again, this is because if you have a dominant culture and you have lots of subcultures, or lots of cultures that are inclined towards your way of thinking, or if all the people in there are lean towards high context while you yourself are low context, you have to adapt to that. And the more cultures that are in a room, the harder it will get, because you don't only have to cater yourself towards a dominant culture, you also have to think about, if I do that, how will the other cultures interpret my behavior and my actions in relation to this dominant culture? Will they think the way that I do? Like, if I'm making a concession, will the other cultures around me see that as a concession as well, or do they have their own interpretation of the dominant culture? You know, go on and so on and so forth. And then there are different languages, different norms, different values. It's just very complex to keep in mind. Don't underestimate the variations within any culture. Yet again, the example I just mentioned. Consider effects of culture on negotiation ethics and tactics, how people go about things, how much of the national culture is influencing the corporate culture, and vice versa. There is no perfect approach to cross-cultural negotiations. You have to select your own tools of analysis. And that is everything that we have gone through the last couple of days with this little project. Yet again, would like to say that it's amazing to go through with the structure, knowing that even though it wasn't as structured as when we went through Hofstad's, because Hofstad's was like, there were dimensions, so you always knew what was going to happen. I always knew I can define it, then I can explain it with theory, then I can explain it with a personal experience. Here it was much more thinking on the go. That sounds stupid, I know, but what I mean is that when I sat down, I got all of these, oh, that's great, that's great, that's great, I can use that, I can use that, this is how these connect, and I talked about this yesterday, I can implement that here, and 2 days ago, that could be applied here as well, and therefore the same kind of point might have been pushed several times. That is also because if you only watch one of the videos, well, there are some very important assumptions that I've made, or not only important assumptions, but some things that I think are very important to mention so that we get that out to as many people as possible, even if you watch one video or if you watch all of them. And of course, I want you to watch all of them and I incentivize you to it, but yeah, there are some things that will be repeated. I'm very happy with this format. I would love to go through another PowerPoint in this way and share my thoughts on the theory, share the theory, as a baseline, and perhaps try to, yet again, connect it to some of my personal experiences. Yet again, this is good in the way that it's a, sequential manner. That's how I measure progress, that I can work through it. I know how much I have until I'm done. I know how many days this will cover approximately, and I know what I'm gonna do, as I said, the next day. However, yet again, as with the Hofstad's project, this is kind of tying me up in ways that, if I find something really interesting, like the Ben & Jerry case that I've just discussed in school today, I cannot just jump into that because that will break up the pacing of the entire thing. Now, I know I did it one day. I quite don't remember how many days ago that was, but I know I did it once, and I just felt when I did it like, I should have continued with the actual format and then saved that point to the next day. But that point was, I think it was a kind of an in the moment thing. I had a good idea about what I was going to say. Anyway, so moving on, tomorrow we're going to start with the sustainability report, hopefully, if I don't find anything else, because now I'm free to do whatever I want. And then after that, we'll see if I start working on another PowerPoint, or if I would like to raise some other of my brain teasers, I'd say, or any other concerns that I would like to discuss, any other attempts of discussion. Yeah, so anyways, until then, mates, I'm pretty happy with this. So till tomorrow, have a nice one. See ya.